and that O with the dots over it, Rggelen. You drink wine and eat roasted sweet chestnuts together with other specialties of the region like ham and cheese and bacon. Many come for just that. It is very popular, and roasted chestnuts are so delicious. And pigs fed on chestnuts are said to produce the best ham and bacon in the world. So another reason to plant at least some chickens or something if you raise hogs, because you can demand a much higher price for your pork. Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, written in the 1860s, says the fruit of the tree and the chinkapin, so the chestnut that was Castanea vesica, that's our native, and the chinkapin, which is a smaller, like shrubbier version I was telling you about, are well known, either eaten raw or boiled. The roots contain an astringent principle, that of the chinkapin boiled in milk is much used in the diarrhea of teething children. I would advise a tea made of this to be used extemporaneously in diarrhea by soldiers in camp. This was written for the Confederate Army, So they had dysentery killed more soldiers than bullets. The late Dr. Nelson Burgess of Sumter, South Carolina, informed me at the recommendation of Dr. Jones that he has used a decoction of the root and bark of chinkapin frequently as a substitute for quinine in intermittent and remittent fevers. So this would be good for certain viruses like COVID and such, potentially, perhaps. And malaria was actually what he was talking about right there. With decidedly satisfactory results. I mentioned this hoping that it would be examined by others. I can have no clue to the reasons of its utility, regarding it heretofore simply as an astringent. But hot water poured over the root and bark, and a large quantity taken for 24 hours, reports Dr. Unziker of Cincinnati, who uses a decoction of the leaves, is useful in the whooping cough. He says he's given it in about 30 cases, in all of which it gave decided relief in 2 weeks. He uses the decoction made with 3 or 4 drachms. That's an old pharmacist measurement. I don't know what the equivalent is, honestly. But I don't think it's one you got to be so specific with, really. I mean, you're talking decoction. You just take the dry plant material and boil it in water until it's reduced by half. But he said it was much used in this disease and in asthma, so whooping cough and asthma. And also found very useful in the Boston Medical School at the time. King's Medical Dispensatory 1898 says, chestnut leaves appear to have been brought into notice as a therapeutic agent by Mr. G.C. Close in a statement before the American Pharmaceutical Association in 1862. Subsequently, they were employed by the late Dr. J.S. Unziker of Cincinnati, I think we just mentioned him, didn't we, who valued them highly in the treatment of whooping cough, since which most favorable reports have been made by other physicians as to their value. These leaves have, thus far, been employed mainly in the treatment of pertussis, in which malady they have proved remarkably efficient, but their manner of action has not yet been determined. It is very probable that they may be found useful in other irritable or excitable conditions of the respiratory nerves. So they thought it had an antispasmodic effect on the respiratory system. Dr. Unziker employed an infusion of the leaves, an ounce to a pint of boiling water, and administered this in a tablespoonful. So there we go. I don't know exactly what a drachm is, but here's just a tea made of the leaves, an ounce to a pint of boiling water, and administered it in tablespoon or small wine glass full doses. So like a little cordial glass is what they're talking, like a sherry glass essentially. Repeatedly several times a day, so they were using it often. The fluid extract, when properly made, will be found reliable. Chestnut bark appears to possess astringent and tonic properties and is used in some sections of our country as a popular remedy for fever and ague, that's malarial fever. Other forms of paroxysmal Paroxysmal means essentially spasmodic. It was often used to describe epileptic seizures, but it's any spasming of a muscle, or especially in this case, we're talking the lungs. So antispasmodic for the lungs, or convulsive cough. So, same thing. Resembling pertussis have been cured with it. Professor Scudder, in a medical journal at the time, suggested trial remedy in cases exhibiting unsteadiness of gait and a disposition to turn to one side. Well, that's interesting. So someone was wobbly when they walked, essentially, and were kind of leaning to one side. So maybe there was a little, vertigo or something. I don't know. That's, you can see that chestnut, much used in European folk medicine, much used in early American official medicine. A doctor would have been making these prescriptions. We don't know a lot about it anymore because the tree has gone essentially extinct. Anything we can do to bring this tree back is going to be an absolute gift to our grandchildren. I think we should absolutely prioritize planting chestnuts, but they're also going to bear fruit in our life. I mean, if you've got 20 years left on your time clock, you'll be able to eat some chestnuts. And they're really, really good. They're really, really good. Mainly I've had the chinkapins. Occasionally, you get some imported chestnuts from Europe or Asia. And they used to be such a part of our American tradition. It's just, you cannot imagine how essential this tree was to our ancestors. There would literally probably not be people, living in the Appalachian Mountains until much later, but America may not have even made it as a nation without the chestnut. I mean, those chestnuts were so essential for food to our ancestors. I mean, before they really started growing potatoes and such, that was the starch. And, you can tell by the legends how important it was to the Appalachian people. And, whether you believe me or not about the potential ghost sighting in South Carolina, I can tell you it is just a really pleasant, whether it's a small chinkapin or a giant chestnut tree, it's just a really pleasant part of the landscape. And, of course, it's medicinal as well. And, if you had ever been in the Allegheny or the Pisgah or one of those old forests and stumbled across an old chestnut stump, you could then understand what our ancestors saw in those trees. I mean, one tree provided enough timber, at least for one house, probably for multiple houses, plus wagons and, everything they needed. They were just huge, and they have a nice fragrance as well. Anyway, y'all, have a good one. And now that the pear pollen is starting to die down, God willing, I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.